Today is July 9th, 2024, and this is William Michael, the headmaster of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Yesterday, I posted an announcement that I'm beginning to share some free homeschool study plans, which break the curriculum down for homeschool families and help them to see how they can satisfy all modern requirements for the various grade levels, but also how they can incorporate real classical Catholic studies. And the goal is to try and cover as much as we can of modern subjects during the elementary years, and also provide the kids with good catechesis during those early years, lots of Bible study, catechism, knowledge of the lives of the saints, history, and so on, so that by the time they reach high school, we've got them in a place where they're strong in all of the basic subjects, and they're efficient and largely becoming independent as students, especially in our program, because they can learn to use the system themselves and work year-round. So that those last 4 years of high school, ages 14 through 18, they can really dig in and get a lot of academic work done. Those are the key years, 14 to 18. But the elementary years are important because we've got to put the kids in the best position possible so that by the time they're coming into their teenage years, they're already in good shape, headed in the right direction with a strong foundation, learning independence in their studies, and really able to make some progress during their high school years. So this grade level study plan that I'm sharing, I'd like you to take some time and look through it. I'd like you to go from K all the way up. So far, I've posted grades K through 5. I'll post grade 6 shortly, and I'll probably have this all done in a few more days. But I'd like you to look through the different grades and see what's the same from grade to grade, and also look to see what's different from grade to grade, because you'll see there's a lot that's the same. And this is one of the benefits of how our program helps homeschool families. If you're a homeschooling mother and you've got a bunch of kids at home, you'll see there's a lot of similarity in these study plans from year to year. And that's an important element of a good homeschool curriculum that most programs don't pay much attention to. But you'll also see what the differences are. And I want you to remember or think about the fact that your oldest child is always the most important because he sets an example and he can also provide help. So if you've got an oldest son or an oldest daughter and she's a few years older, 12, 13 years old, as you're getting started in homeschooling, you want to make sure that that child is a good student with a good foundation, because that child becomes the model for the younger children. And then you want to help the younger children become independent as they get up to age 12, 13, so they can start working on their own, and you can devote your attention to the younger children. The younger children are always the ones who need the most help. So even though the subjects get more difficult as the kids get older, you can direct them to us for help. And if they're working independently, they can learn to reach out to us themselves for help. The ones who are going to need the most help are the little ones. And you want to be able, as a homeschooling parent, to work with the little ones to make sure they get the help they need. When we look at all of the courses that I've taught, all the videos and talks I've done, if there's one thing that I dread, it's when parents ask me for content, especially video content, for younger children, like the Petty School program, because teaching young children is extremely difficult. That takes the most work. And so as parents, the goal is to get the older kids working independently so that you can then constantly devote your attention to the youngest kids, because they're the ones who are going to need the most help. And our program is designed to allow kids to become independent in their studies by the time they're 12, 13 years old. And independent doesn't mean they don't need to be supervised, but it means that they can learn to do all of the tasks that they need to do for their studies on their own, with just some direction and supervision from their parents. And one of the things I always try to emphasize is your children will accomplish the most in homeschooling when you act like a parent rather than if you try to be a teacher at home. Your children need their parents to be parents, and you need to lean on others to fulfill the role of teachers or tutors, helping your children, providing academic support for your children, and so on. Lean upon experts with academic work so that you can devote your time and attention and energy to being a mother or a father to your children. That's what will allow them to get the most done in homeschooling. Many homeschool parents, they try to turn into teachers at home. And when they do that, their kids may look impressive with respect to academic work, but what happens is that role of mother or father gets neglected. And the family just becomes a little academic community, and it's pretty miserable. It's like living with your teacher from school and not being able to go home to mom and dad. That's why I always tell parents it's good to have the kids lean on their teachers as much as possible, especially for academic help, especially when they need to be pushed and challenged, because it's good for the teacher outside the house to be the bad guy and to have mom and dad be supportive and positive and have that outside source of pressure and challenge and exhortation, admonition, getting on the kids when they're being lazy, getting on them when they're being sloppy, challenging them to work more carefully, because you can turn that teacher off and give the kids a break. But if the parents try to be that teacher, the kids never get a break and they get exasperated. And that's not how Christian parenting works. So our program is designed so that kids age 12, 13, and older can start to lean on us for help more and more through email, through live chat, if necessary, through Zoom meetings, though I really don't think they're necessary. But that's how our program's designed to work. And so for mom and dad, it's best to try to have your attention focused on the little ones because they need the most help. So that's how this program is designed to work. Again, I'm a homeschooling father who also is a classroom teacher, a school administrator, a curriculum developer. I get to see both sides. And when I look at the homeschools, what I see as the fault of homeschool programs is that they put too much pressure on the parents to become teachers or teachers' assistants rather than being parents. And I'm trying to not do that. And that's why this set of study plans is so important. So I want you to look through the study plans grade by grade. I want you to pay attention to the similarities, and I want you to note the differences. And when you look at these study plans, you may open them up and say, whoa, this is a lot of stuff. How in the world are we going to get through this? And I want you to just relax, because there's a lot to think about when you look at all of the content in these study plans. When I was a college student, just to give you some background of the mission and the vision for the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, when I was a college student, I was a straight A student. I was at the top of my class at Rutgers University as a classics student, and I had all kinds of options available to me to go on to graduate school, take a teaching fellowship, on and on. But what really burdened me was that I knew as a Christian that kids in K to 12 schools, Christian kids, were not getting the education that they needed. And as I thought about my mission for my life, what I wanted to do, how I could serve God in the best way possible, what constantly gnawed at me was the fact that kids in K to 12 schools are not getting the level of study that they need when they need it. They need it much earlier. It's got to be pressed down into the earliest possible years so that they can learn as much as possible before they have to make important vocational decisions. And I knew that as an 18-year-old, I was not prepared. And as I meditated on the golden rule, I thought, what would I want someone in my situation to do for me if I was a kid in K to 12 schools, a Christian kid, age 12, 14, 17? What would I want someone to do? What would be good for me? It would be for someone who is a good academic, who's successful in school, who is gifted in learning and is able to teach, to come down and help me. And that was the vision that I had as I was 24 years old. And I devoted myself to Christian education. And as I got into Christian education, I still wasn't satisfied working in schools. And I said to myself, no, there's still more needed. We can't do this in existing schools. Because what happened to me was, as I was teaching, there's always the middle 80% of the students, the average students, most students. And then there's always a few students who have some problems and they need special arrangements. They need to go slower. They need more help. They have to just accept the reality that they're not going to be able to accomplish in a given amount of time what they need to for real academic success. And they need to be helped in mercy. But then there's also a top 10%, really extraordinary students, gifted students, motivated students, really bright, sharp students who have great, great potential for learning. And those kids are neglected in modern schools. Those kids are bored in modern schools. And as I was teaching, I felt for those kids because I felt like I was one of those kids. I was one of those gifted kids that was just sort of stuck in the corner and put out of the way so that the teacher could focus on the 80%. I was gifted from the time I was very young. When I was 5 years old in kindergarten, I was able to read so well that my teacher used to give me books, and she would take her break and have me read to the class while she, took time to go to the bathroom, get a snack, get a cup of coffee, and so on. I was gifted from the time I was young, but I was never challenged. There was only one teacher, maybe two, who ever challenged me between kindergarten and 12th grade. But I was never challenged, and so all of my intelligence, instead of being directed towards academic work, was directed towards being funny, just being silly and humorous and joking around and trying to make people laugh. That's how I exercised my intelligence, because the school really didn't provide for me, didn't give any attention to kids like me. They'd put us in a special talented program, but they really didn't challenge us to learn more. They didn't have anything to offer us that would just allow us to fulfill our potential. And for me, coming from a family that had no money, there was no option to do anything greater. So I was just stuck there in the normal class with the normal kids, and I was never challenged until high school. My freshman year of high school, I was a pretty good athlete, and I was pretty cocky because of athletics, and I was popular, and I was the class clown and all this. And I had one teacher come up to me one day after class and confront me on my fooling around. And he told me, he said, I can make sure you never play any sports again. And he got in my face and he yelled at me about how I was wasting my talent, how I wasn't fulfilling my potential, and that if I wanted help, that if I wanted a challenge, he would challenge me. He was the only teacher who had ever done that. It was Bill Clausen, a history teacher, my freshman year. He was the school soccer coach. I played football, but he was the soccer coach. That was the first time I ever was challenged academically, and I loved it. I loved his class. He was always hard on me, extra hard on me, always asked me to do more, challenged me to do more, challenged me to reach for higher standards and so on. But I only had him for one class for 1 year in high school, and that was it. The other teacher, same year, freshman year, was a math teacher, a Mrs. Aspercolis, who yelled at me and warned me that my blue eyes were not going to get me very far in life. And she used to be very hard on me too, because I was intellectually gifted, and I would sit and take freshman math classes and just solve all the problems in my head, write the answers. And she initially thought I was cheating, so she'd have me come after school and she would make me do the tests in front of her so she could watch. And she saw that I was bright, but I was a clown. And she got on my case and was always stern with me. And those two teachers helped me at that point. But I kept fooling around. But the reason why I was fooling around was because I was never challenged. And there was nothing for me to do. And really my intellectual skill didn't become manifest until my junior year, when I scored like 1320 on the SAT with no preparation. And that's when my teachers realized that I was gifted, but they interpreted it as he's lazy or he's wasting his talent. And so that was my frustration in high school, especially as I got older. I was very intellectually gifted. I wasn't challenged, had no direction, no help, nothing put before me to do. And so I just goofed around. And fortunately, when I converted to Christianity and sort of gained some direction in my life, I was able to get my act together, get disciplined, and start fulfilling my potential. And that's what happened once I got to college. So when I came out of college, I had all of that in my mind, and I said, I have to develop a program for those kids like me. I have to develop a program for the elite students, because as funny as it may seem, they get neglected in schools. And I had a couple of those students when I first began teaching, and I could help them personally, but as far as the school was concerned, there really wasn't much for them to do, and I saw that. And so I said, I'm going to develop a program that no one can exhaust. I don't care how talented you are, how gifted, how much you love studying. I'm going to develop a program that will challenge even the brightest students. And that's really what led me to establish the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I wanted to create a program for the elite students. So when you look at these study plans, I don't want you to get nervous or overwhelmed. I want you to say to yourself, this is what Mr. Michael has arranged for elite students. This is an elite grade level program. And you'll see that. And I don't want you to get discouraged by that. I want you to know that I'm trying to prepare a program that the best students, a young Saint Dominic could come into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy and be challenged. Now, as for the middle 80%, the average students, they're not going to get all this stuff done, and that's okay because they don't need to. The grade level standards for modern schools are designed for the 80%. Now, I still think they're too low. I think that students need to constantly be challenged. I used to have a principle raising my own kids that I always used to tell my wife. I would say, I want to push the kids as hard as I can. And when I see them start to break, that's when we need to loosen up a little bit. But they need to be pushed. They need to be challenged. And I want to have a program that always challenges the kids, because when kids are challenged and overwhelmed, it also teaches them humility because they feel weak. And think about it. Christ said to St. Paul, "My power is perfected in weakness. My grace is sufficient for you." It's good for us to be in a place where we feel our weakness. It's good for us to be in a place like that. It prevents pride and arrogance. When we dumb down a curriculum and make everything easy, we make kids arrogant who think they're very smart, who aren't very smart. So we don't want to dumb down the program. We don't want to make it so easy that everyone can do it. We want to create a program that challenges the elite students. And then with the 80% of the average students, we want to challenge them to work as hard as they can to get as much done as they can. And so for the average student, this is ultimately a challenge of work ethic. How disciplined can you be? How hard can you work? How consistent can you be? It's a challenge to grow in virtue for the average students. And then for the slower students who have problems with learning, in former times, they wouldn't have gone to school at all. So we want to be positive with them and encourage them to just get as much done as they can. And we want to teach them spiritually how to think about themselves and their studies and their relation to other students and so on. A very important principle that needs to be taught to kids, especially in schooling, is our Lord's teaching when he says, "To whom much is given, much is expected. To whom little or less is given, less is expected." So the expectations are always to be relative to the giftedness. And strong students need to be told, to whom much is given, much is expected. So the question is always, are you fulfilling your potential? That's the test. And to the weaker students, we want to encourage them and tell them, to whom less is given, less is expected. So there's not the same pressure on you. The standards cannot be absolute. If you have problems, if you've got weaknesses, the expectations are lower, and we just stay positive and try to get done as much as we can. And so we've got these three different groups of students: the elite students, very gifted, usually motivated, who need to be challenged. We've then got the average students who lack the intellectual gifts of the elite students, but they need to learn that you can make up for a lack of gifts with an abundance of labor. That's why we have the old Roman saying, labor vincit omnia, labor or hard work, grinding toil conquers all things. And then for the weaker students, we want to encourage them to do as much as they can and stay positive. And even in our own families, we're going to have those three different kids in our own home, among our own children. We might have an elite child. We might have an extremely weak child, and we will probably have a few average children. Even in my own family, we had this. We had my oldest daughter, Elizabeth, is brilliant. She could read when she was 3 years old. She's just an amazing person. My oldest son, Jonathan, has very little interest in studies or school. He's very physical. He's a military officer. But he's brilliant at the same time. He can pick up skills almost invisibly, like accidentally. He learned to play guitar. He can sit around and play guitar, and he's never had guitar lessons. He just picks things up very easily, but he doesn't necessarily appreciate them or like them. And then we've got another daughter who didn't learn to read well until she was 10 years old. And we had another son who had all kinds of physical problems and really couldn't do anything because he was having accidents as he entered into his teenage years. And it turned out to be a physical problem he had that was corrected with surgery that we didn't know about. So we've got this mixture of kids, and they have all these different strengths and weaknesses, and we have to have a program that provides for all of them. And our program is designed to provide for all of them. It's not made for just the 80%. It's not made just for the elite. It's also not made to try to make everyone equal. It's a program that's so deep, that's so broad, that the most gifted students, the most motivated students can never exhaust it. And yet it's set up in a way that even the simplest, weakest students can make good progress. And we've had some amazing stories of kids with problems, with physical problems, with handicaps, who have accomplished great things. I don't want to share their stories because it might be a little embarrassing for them to hear me share their stories, but I've had a number of students come into the CLAA with some serious problems and overcome them because of classical Catholic studies. So our program is intended for a mixed audience, but most importantly, it's designed to serve elite students. Everyone else can get as far as they want, but it's designed to not prepare too little for elite students. So when you look at it, don't be overwhelmed. But what I'd like you to see as you go through it is that there are task lists for each subject area, and on the homeschool page at classicalliberalarts.com/homeschool, I explained that one of the principles of successful homeschooling is always staying positive, always being positive. And I think this is a virtue that I learned through sports and coaching, that you just always have to focus on the next play. In sports, good athletes are said to have no memory of bad plays. They have a bad play or a bad game, and the next game, the next play, they go at it as if the bad game never happened. They don't remember the past. They just focus on what's ahead. Always positive, always getting better, always focusing on improving, not worrying about how yesterday was or what we did the last time we came to bat or the time we dropped the pass. That really doesn't matter. What matters is that we get better, that we get better, that we get better. And that positive mindset is what allows us to make progress, especially when it's combined with patience. And mentally, we learn to give ourselves time to be positive and to be patient, to give ourselves time to continue getting better and better. That's the reason why the CLAA exists, is because I've gone into this work with the same mindset that I would go into playing sports with. I just want to get better and better and better, constantly improving. And some people complain about that, but that's part of the process of overcoming challenges, finding solutions to problems, and getting better and better and better. And as parents, especially as homeschooling parents, that's what your work consists of, just constantly focusing on the next thing, on getting better, on helping to deal with problems, overcome problems, getting better, little by little, bit by bit. Be patient. There's lots of time. That's really the attitude that you need to bring, not just to homeschooling, but to parenting in general. You've got to be positive and you've got to be patient. So when you look at these study plans, look at them with a positive and patient spirit. Don't think about, the fact that there may be 8 or 9 subjects and there may be 30 to 80 tasks in some of the lists. We're just going to start at the beginning and work one task at a time. And every day we're going to try to get as much done as we can. I don't know how much is going to get done. I don't know how far our students can get. I'm laying these study plans out with elite students in mind, because in the academy, I've got some elite students. I see how they get through lesson content. I see the pace at which they work. And I know that they're going to devour these study plans. And so I'm trying to lay them out to be sufficient for those kids. And for everyone else, I just want you to focus on the next task, all that we can do today, as much as we can do today, working as hard as we can, making the best possible use of our time today, just one day at a time, trying to have the best day of studies that we can, focusing on tasks, not wandering all over the place, focusing on tasks and checking checkboxes and moving forward day by day by day. That's how we need to approach homeschooling. That's the mentality that we need to develop and teach our children. Just get tasks done. Don't waste time. Keep getting tasks done. The college I went to, Rutgers University, has a great football coach, Greg Schiano. And Greg Schiano has built the whole program, a football program at Rutgers. He's built it with a simple illustration that he uses to teach the players, and it becomes the central theme of everything he teaches them. Everything he gives them to do is based on this one illustration, and it's called chopping. And so the motto for Rutgers football program is chop. And he teaches the players to think of their lives as a man cutting down a tree. And the man takes his axe and he focuses on one spot on that tree, and he starts whacking that tree with the axe, and he just keeps his eyes pinned on that one spot, and he just keeps whacking and whacking and whacking, just intensely again and again and again and again until finally that tree falls. And the coach teaches that concept of chopping is how we get through every challenge, every difficulty, every project, every task we've got to do. We just chop and chop and chop until everything in our path falls down. And it's a very helpful illustration to think about when we've got work to do. Just start chopping and chopping. It doesn't matter if it takes 100 strokes or 100,000 strokes. We just keep chopping and chopping and chopping until that tree falls. And that's how we go about our business. And so as you look at all these tasks, just look at this whole program like the grade 6 study plan. Look at it as some great cedar tree out in the woods that needs to be cut down. And every one of these tasks is like a chop of the axe. And we're just going to chop and chop and chop until it all gets done. And that's how it gets done. We say little by little, bit by bit, that's how work gets done. It's that just constant chopping and chopping and chopping. It's that grinding toil. You know, we use the word grind. And when I had students present in my classroom teaching, and when we had some boarding students here, I used to tell them, you need to accept a boring life where you just grind at your work, where you learn to just love your daily toil. That's what St. Benedict taught us when he taught pray and work, just to simplify your life. Try to leave out of your life things that aren't necessary. Focus all of your attention on your necessary tasks and just pray and work. That simple, I used to joke and say it, just that simple, boring life, doing your job. That's how you accomplish great things. And I had some students take that advice and accomplish some great things. But it's that temptation to do 1,000 different things, to always be entertained, to always be doing something new. That's the spirit that never accomplishes anything. Think of water just running through stone. Just little by little, drop by drop, water can cut through the largest stones. Whole riverbeds are carved out just by water flowing the same path for years and years and years, wearing that stone away in a way that no one can even observe it until hundreds of years, thousands of years go by, and all of a sudden there's a great channel made through rock by water. That's how work gets done. And so we want to cultivate that spirit as we study and do our work. So don't be intimidated. Just think of yourself as the water and look at this study plan as the rock and say, it's just by running and running and running that we can wear down this rock and cut through it and be successful. It's just by chopping and chopping and chopping that we can take this tree down. So there's lots of illustrations we could give, but you've really got to learn to have that mentality when you go into studies, because it's boring, it's grinding, it's difficult, it takes virtue, it takes a long time, it takes consistency. We have to be growing in virtue if we're going to make great progress in studies. One of the virtues is prudence. You can't have prudence without temperance. You can't have prudence without courage. You can't have prudence without justice or without faith or hope or charity. All of these virtues have to be cultivated if we're going to pursue wisdom. So there's a lot more to studying than just doing your schoolwork. It's really a challenge for us to grow in virtue. And that's what I'd like to challenge you in as parents. And if any students are listening, I'd like to challenge you to understand that everything you hate about studies is really about virtue. It's really about growing in virtue, prudence, temperance, fortitude, justice, faith, hope, and charity. Those are the 7 virtues. Everything that students hate about studying, they actually hate about virtue. That's the real challenge. And I think it's encouraging to think of it like that. The reason why studying is difficult is because it takes virtue. The reason why I don't like to study is because I am inclined to vice. I would much rather be fooling around. I'd much rather be idle, just staring into space, doing something useless, and so on. Study challenges us to be virtuous, to grow in virtue. And as we grow in virtue, we get better and better at studying. Today, for example, I started my academic work probably around 11 o'clock in the morning. It's 4 o'clock in the morning right now. So I've been working for 12, 16 hours? I've been doing academic work for 16 hours today at my desk. Thankfully, I have a stand-up desk, so I don't have to sit in a chair all day, but I put in 16 hours today so far, and I'm fine. I have plenty of energy because over the years, I've just become used to this discipline of study and my academic work. I started when I was 19 years old, and today I can work almost endlessly because I don't get tired doing it. I'm used to the daily grind of it. I'm used to the simplicity of it, and I've learned to sort of free myself from other interests or distractions and just concentrate on my work. And it's that spirit that we need to cultivate. I learned it from others. I learned it from studying the lives of some great teachers that I admired by reading their biographies and learning about their own disciplines and habits. And that's when I started to see just how much I had to grow in virtue in order to become a great student. So there's a lot more to be learned here than just the content of our lessons. What ultimately is going to determine our long-term success is whether or not we grow in virtue. That's the real challenge. And even as parents, as homeschool parents, you may not be good students. You may not have these virtues. You may find the daily grind of homeschool life to be unbearable, and you have to grow in virtue for the sake of your children. You've got to learn to calm yourself down. You've got to learn to deny yourself social activity. You've got to learn that you don't need to go out and about and run around town with the kids and engage in 1,000 different activities, trying to have some social life. But it would be better for the kids if They worked on their math studies today and did their grammar work and worked on writing and did some handwriting practice and studied history and worked on their catechism and read the scriptures and said their prayer. It would be better for you to deny yourself that frenetic running around that many homeschool parents do, and think of the story in the Gospels of Martha and Mary, where Martha is busy and troubled with many things. Jesus said she's running around all over. And Mary, not the Virgin Mary, but another Mary, is just sitting at Jesus' feet, focused on the one thing necessary. And Martha comes to complain to Jesus and says, "Don't you care that my sister's just sitting there when there's all this work to do? And she's not helping? Why don't you tell her to help me?" And Jesus says, "Martha, you're busy and troubled with many things, but only one thing is necessary. And Mary has chosen the better thing, the better part. What she has will not be taken away from her." And so Jesus points us to that image of Mary sitting at his feet, focused on the one thing necessary, not running all around busy. And that's not to denigrate work in any way. We all have necessary work to do, but we have to distinguish between necessary work, goal-oriented work, and busy work, because it's very easy to be busy. So this is the real challenge, not just of homeschooling, but of the Christian life. Busy people also likely don't pray as Catholics are supposed to pray. Sometimes they'll replace the discipline of prayer with what the church calls the battle of prayer. They'll replace it with just, certain activities like going to Mass. Not that obviously anything's wrong with going to Mass. But if going to Mass is used as an excuse to avoid prayer throughout the day, let's say the opportunity to pray the Liturgy of the Hours, these activities, these isolated activities, can be used to get out of growth in the discipline of daily prayer, of the routine and discipline of prayer. So we need to grow in virtue. So as you look at these study plans, I want you to see it as a challenge, because I'm challenging Catholic families. I'm challenging homeschooling parents. I'm challenging homeschooling students. Everyone complains about modern education. But the people who complain about modern education don't fix modern education, because they're not willing to be different. They're not willing, some say be the change that you want to see in the world. They're not willing to actually be the one who becomes different. And you can see how that relates to the virtue of fortitude or courage. We can complain about the church, we can complain about schools, we can complain about how our society is ignorant and foolish and all this. We can complain and complain and complain. But if we don't change, if we're not different ourselves, we're part of the problem. We're not the solution to the problem. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth." We're supposed to be different. Not complaining. We're supposed to actually be different. We're supposed to show a contrast between God's will and the way of the world. We're supposed to show, to bear witness to demonstrate a different way of life, a different life. And think about how you feel when you see a nun walk into a room. If you've ever been to a monastery and see the nuns, how they just move about quietly through the day, there's something about them that's so peaceful, so beautiful, so inspiring. And then you go off to your life and you're like a ping pong ball all over the place. Tasmanian devil, my wife and I like to say. We know what that virtuous life looks like, and we're all challenged to pursue that virtuous life, that way of perfection, as far as we're able. But we've got to choose personally to become different if we're going to do different things. If we're going to do better things, we have to live better than those who are doing the inferior things. We have to be careful that we don't complain about things, but then do the same things everyone else is doing. And so I'd like you to see these study plans as a challenge. I want to raise the bar. I want Catholic community to fulfill its potential. I want Catholic families to fulfill their potential. I want Catholic students to fulfill their potential. And these study plans are presented as a challenge for us to take up, to learn how to work through, and grow in virtue, and by growing in virtue, fulfill our potential and restore great learning, which Catholics, and I have to be careful here because I don't want to make historical claims that aren't true. It's not true that Catholics in the old days were a lot smarter, but no, that's not true. Hardly anyone went to school. But those who did go to school, they understood that school was work. St. Benedict said that our study can only be considered Christian study if we pursue it with the same diligence that we do our manual labor. And so we need to look at our studies as a form of work. We need to go to work when we study. So that's what this study plan is intended to do. So I encourage you to go through these study plans. As I've said, I've got K to 5 already posted. I'm going to post grade 6 in a little bit today. And then I should have the rest of it done probably by the end of this week. Today's the 9th of July, as I said. So by the 14th or so, I should have all of these study plans posted. And then we've got a month and a half before September arrives where we can look through them, start thinking about our plans, start getting ourselves ready, and try to help our kids make progress in these things. Now, when I present these grade level study plans, I want you to know that I know that most students are not going to be ready for these plans at their current grade level. I know that. This is going to be a year. I've never published anything like this before. This is going to be a year of preparation. That's the way that I'm looking at it. My goal this year is to help as many students as are willing to get themselves into shape so that next year they can enter into their grade level ready to go, ready in all subject areas, ready to pick up their grade level based on their age and work on that whole program. So I understand that as I publish these, it's a challenge that I'm presenting to the Catholic community, to the Catholic homeschool community, God willing, to the Catholic private school community. It's a challenge for us to take up and, rather than complain about modern education, actually do better. And so I know that this upcoming year, we're going to be, not ready to enter into this necessarily, but we can use this next year to get ourselves organized with this in view as the future, and we can start moving towards this so that next year we can really have things organized nicely and hit the ground running. Now, as families get started with these study plans, I had mentioned yesterday putting marks in the plans where I could set a goal, for let's try to get here by the end of the year. I'm not going to do that. What I'd like to just let families start using these plans, and I would just like to see how much we can get done. I'd like to challenge everyone to get as much done as possible. I know there are some really great homeschool families that work in the academy. I know that they can make great progress in these plans, and I'd like to see how much they get done. There are families in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy that are super homeschool families. I mean, they get far more done than my wife and I with our own children get done. And usually it's because the homeschooling mother is really focused and diligent and organized and professional about it, and she has the household in order, and she's got the support of her husband, and they just dig in and work and work and work, and they accomplish amazing things. I'd like to see how those families, how our superstar families work through these plans. I'd like to see how our elite students work through these plans, see how much they get done, and whether these study plans challenge them. And then as I start getting that data back, that feedback in terms of how everyone does, I can start fine-tuning them and start marking points where I think we have some reasonable goals to set for the 80% of families, for most families. And so I'm going to hold off doing that until I'm able to see how our students do with these things. So anyway, all of these study plans are available freely. They're at classicalliberal.com/homeschool. They're intended to be challenging, and I ask that you take up this challenge with a positive attitude and a patient spirit, knowing that we have to grow in virtue if we're going to raise the bar in Catholic education and culture. And this is an opportunity for us to do that, a concrete resource to help us to raise the bar and continue raising the bar. There's one other thing I want to say before I wrap up here. These study plans, I'm just offering them freely for homeschool families to take and copy and use as they please. I always make it clear that homeschool parents are always in charge of their children's studies. So I can't force anyone to do this or do that, and I don't try to. But what I'm going to have available on the study center, I'm going to take these study plans and I'm going to turn them into a number of grade level certificate courses where you can track student progress through a certain grade level. And if you do complete all the tasks in that grade level course, I'll award a certificate on behalf of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy that will recognize that a student has completed the requirements of whatever grade he or she is in. So there's going to be grade level certificate courses on the study center. You'll see them start to pop up, and I'll eventually open them when they're ready. But I'll have these task requirements built into those grade level certificate courses, and the kids can work through and mark them complete. And when they're all complete, they can submit a request for a review at the end, and then I'll go and I'll look through their work and make sure that everything has been done that's supposed to be done. And when I see that everything's been done, I'll award them a certificate, which I think will be motivating for the kids and significant, because it's going to be difficult to get that certificate. It's going to be valuable. One other thing is I want to encourage every family to make sure that they have some plan for standardized testing. We now offer standardized testing in the academy. It costs $25 for a student. It's online, so you can do it at home. You can oversee it as the parent. For $25, we're able to register students so that they get a practice test to work on, and then the full California Achievement Test. And you can do it from home. You can even choose a timed or untimed option. Obviously, most people choose untimed, but that's available to you from home to administer standardized tests for your children each year. And what we're going to do is, around March, by the end of March, probably we'll collect orders for anyone who wants to register for standardized testing. I'll place the order on behalf of the CLEA because it gets everyone discounted rates for registration. We'll then get all of that sign-in information, all of your account information for your testing. We'll give all that to you by email. Then you have as much time as you want to administer those tests. You can take it whenever you want. You can take one part at a time, so there's no stress. You don't have to devote a whole day or 2 days to testing. It's very convenient. We did it for the first time this past spring, and it went very well. So testing is available. The California Achievement Test is available through the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and I'd like as many students as possible to be testing. And it's not a test, really a test to grade a student or rank the students or anything like that. It allows us to see where they have weaknesses. That's all that matters. Remember, we need to have a positive look at education. I want to know where my children's weaknesses are, not so I can yell at them and punish them and threaten them and tell them they're worthless. I want to know where their weaknesses are so I know where to direct my energy and attention and resources to help build them up in those areas. We want to know where our kids' weaknesses are. We want to know as a program, as a school community, we want to know where our weaknesses are because we can fix them. So I'd like to have as many kids testing as possible. If you already have testing arrangements, you've already been testing someplace else, that's fine. But I would like to ask for the opportunity to see some of the kids' results. Again, as an educator, I would just like to know how the kids are doing. What are they doing well on? What are they doing badly on? Not because I want to, laugh at them or anything stupid. I want to help them. I want to fix the problems. I want to fill in gaps and find solutions that will help strengthen them where they're weak. So if you'd share test results with me, I'd really appreciate that. It's all confidential and private. I'm not going to share anything, obviously. So the study plans are being made available. Certificate courses for the grade levels are going to be available in the study center. And it's also important, as I said, for us to do testing. One last thing is for us to consider attendance. It's important for us. It's so easy to get lost in the busyness of life. My wife, I used to joke with my wife because there would be weeks where she would have 2 good school days with the kids. And if I talked to her, she would say, "Oh, we've been having school every day." And I would say, "Dania, you've had school 2 days in the past 6 days." But time just goes by and you just are busy and there's so much to do and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And the next thing you know, it feels like you just had school, but that was 3 days ago. So it's good for us to have some accountability for regularity in homeschooling. It's a problem that we need help with. And so in those grade level certificate courses, there's also going to be the requirement to mark attendance. So to say, like, today was a school day. And then if the next day wasn't, you leave it unchecked. And the next day you mark it checked. We had a school day. We put in a good solid 5.5 hours of school time. So just by having these tools and these sources of accountability, we can challenge ourselves and help one another to grow in virtue, to grow in discipline, to grow in these virtues that will help us to accomplish more and more. Because if anyone's going to raise the bar in Catholic education in 2024, it's going to be us. And we're going to choose to take up that challenge and do it, or we're just going to leave it as if it's someone else's job and choose to just be idle complainers. So I'd like to challenge you. I'm trying to make the tools available that make it as easy as possible, at least to see and take aim at, so that we can start to organize things. And I think that if we can commit to these plans and start learning to work task by task, little by little, bit by bit, we can do it. I think we can do it. So that's what I wanted to share about these study plans. Feel free to share them with friends. Let other homeschool families know they're available. I think we can make the best education possible as efficiently as possible, as affordably as possible. And that's all starting to come together. And it's all accredited too. So that gives us some benefits, which I'll get into at some other time. But anyway, I hope that's helpful. I'm working as hard as I can to try to get these things done this week because I've got so much other work to do. I'm trying to get myself in a position so that in September, I've got nothing to do other than post-lesson content and grade student work. That's really what I'd like all my time devoted to, and I'm trying to get all the administrative work done in July and early August. So if there's anything you can think of that seems like it needs to be attended to, I'd appreciate a note. But other than that, I think these study plans and the certificate courses that are going to be available are going to be a radical help in this upcoming school year as we move forward with lots of new enrollments. And I think, lots of encouragement. So let's go get it. Let's do our best. Focus on all the work that's ahead of us and do what we can to glorify God through our work as Catholic homeschooling families. I hope that's helpful. God bless.